You are now listening to the Business Banter podcast, where top minds in business collide and wisdom is exposed. My name is Jack Kozakowski. I'll be your host for the day. My passion for this podcast is that you walk away better personally and professionally from the amazing stories that are told. Now let's get ready to banter. Super stoked. Episode number 8 of Business Banter podcast. It just keeps getting better and better. People loving it. So today I have Andy Vanetta on. She's the CEO of Vanetta Partners. They are a boutique recruiting firm. So they recruit for salespeople. So if you're a startup with Series A, they actually go out and find the right fit for you. They find the people, they do all of the qualifying, and they really ramp up and bring your new hires on for you. So if you're a SaaS founder, or they don't do a lot of services, but they do mainly SaaS. If you're looking to find somebody to sell your product, they will be the one to find the right person. Because we all know if you screw up on the hiring, it's going to cost you a lot of time and a lot of money. She has some phenomenal insight into what you should actually be looking for when you hire your first salespeople. So we do talk a lot about the services side too. So I give my story and like problems and challenges that I've had in the past. And she gives some excellent answers. Talk about diversity in sales and going out and finding women in sales. Especially, we kind of focus on that because we know that's a hot topic. There's so much learning here for anybody that's a entrepreneur, business owner, whether you're in SaaS or services. So I'm excited for you to hear Andy's story and to hear her wisdom. So let's get ready to banter. Okay, super excited today to have Andy Vanetta, right? Did I say that right? Okay. So Andy and I have been running in the same circles for a really long time. We've got a lot of the same tech friends who are founders. And I think one of the major reasons I want to have Andy on here is because I know the company she works with. So I know the work she's doing, which is just amazing. And I know it's something that we can identify with, which is hiring your first 5 salespeople, right? So we're going to talk about kind of like the quote unquote term of recruiting, which I think she's going to bat this down here in a minute of maybe even using that term. Maybe we need to come up with new terminology. But I really want, the goal of this for everybody that's listening is for you to walk away and say, wow, I really have some actionable things to think about. And I really need to start to follow, maybe a new set of, have a new way of thinking about hiring my first, 2 first salesperson, my second salesperson, my third one, 5th, all the way up the ladder. But Andy's amazing. So I'm going to let you in 15 seconds or less, give us your brief, who I am.
Yeah. I have a boutique recruitment firm and we partner with early stage companies, mainly at the seed and early A stage. So we're doing exactly this. We're finding first sales hires and we're helping companies holistically hire is what I like to call it. So thinking about planning for not just your first 5, but what does your organization look like at 10, 50, 100, 300, and really make that planning more about bringing your leaders to the table and having a high EQ and having the self-awareness you need in order to attract diverse talent, right? In order to understand how are we approaching recruiting in a way that's more holistic, which is really important. So really, I think at the end of the day, it's more about the preparation and the executive team than it is really about the tactics of recruiting. So I would like to get into that with you for sure.
Yeah. So, I can tell you that we're going to talk about this a little bit later, but I want to preference that there's really two types of hiring, right? That we're going to kind of talk about. One is for a product and, maybe a SaaS product or, some type of technology or whatever that product is. And then we're going to talk about the services side because I'm going through a really interesting period right now with Creation Agency where we've gotten to a point where we need to think about hiring a couple salespeople if we're going to scale, right? Mm-hmm. So, my first question is, I've battled with when do you and I know there's 2 parts to this question, but when do you know that it's time to start to hire a salesperson? When do you and you kind of have to probe people, right? Because with your boutique agency, you don't want to take on people that you feel are not ready to bring on their first salesperson because it's just going to be detrimental to you. But what's kind of some checks and balances on that And I'd really like to know the answer because I don't know, right? I mean, I'm at that point. Do I go spend an expensive salary?
I think we have to stay in the lane of probably SaaS companies right now because it's like apples and oranges. It's so incredibly different. And I'll stay in that lane because it's definitely what I know. And again, I mean, I've learned everything that I know by being next to the founders during their time of growth and struggle, and understanding that usually the first sales hire comes when they can't handle the sale anymore themselves, right? Like they're often the founders doing a lot of the sales, and like their desk is just overloaded. And so they come to me kind of like, hey, SOS, come in, handle all of this and help me find somebody that can take over these leads. So that's a very common profile that I find because I'm
But
dealing.
you could have that with the services side, right? Too. I mean, that's just, I mean, you could really say that on the services side. Say you're a consultant or you're, it's like I'm at that point now where I'm like, okay, I've got to handle the operational side of the business because it's gotten so big. I don't have time to keep doing the new business, right? Like I need somebody that's doing that full time. So I think that maybe the SaaS and services could be the same in that aspect.
It's really similar. I think absolutely when you find that you're doing all of it, I mean, you simply need to realize that you can't. You need to find somebody that's going to come in and understand the operational aspect, of course, because you're so scrappy and young that, they need to have a business mind. I think an entrepreneurial DNA is really, really important for your first sales hire. But really, if you're at that point where in order to double your company, you got to bring in a rep, like you've got to bring in a rep and just look at it, kind of reverse engineer. What are your revenue goals? There comes a point where you sort of hit a ceiling without that person. So you've got to duplicate yourself, so to speak.
So, okay.
I also think as a services founder like yourself, I mean, you're the brand, right? A lot of what's so special about being in services is it's less about the product brand and more about the human brand. So it takes a lot of vetting to bring on the right salesperson because they really have to embody who you are, and you have to trust that they're going to be out there selling in a similar way, right? And you're selling a true solution as a services firm. It's very intricate and very it's very unique in that regard. So
yeah, it's like services as a service, right?
mm-hmm.
This is where I think I hear from, early stage founders that we work with, this is where it gets tough. But on the services side too, from where I'm coming from is, how do you understand the salary aspect of this? Because I think this is where it gets tough, is like when you're, kind of like building and building and building, you're investing all this money back, and this comes on the SaaS
Mm-hmm.
side, this comes on the services side,
Mm-hmm.
and you're saying, okay, I can't afford to go out and hire the $100,000 salaried salesperson, right? But at the same point, I can't afford not to go out and hire the $50,000 one that sucks, right? And I know that the $100,000 one can suck too, but like, how do you balance that? Like, how do you get around that? Because is that a struggle you see when you're going and recruiting, is the salary piece?
I think for my business, we're very commission driven. So it's something to consider. I think that you should be attracting people that want to work on a heavy commission model, and really divvying up their deal to be more about the variable. I mean, I think every startup would like to think that they're attracting commission-driven people, right? People that are more interested in the long game with equity. And I think that's another struggle that services firms have. I mean, I don't know if you have an equity play.
Yep, we do.
Yeah, so that's helpful. You absolutely should. But I mean, you really have to cut them in on the larger revenue goal in order for them to be really attached to that. And I don't know if it's smart to bring somebody in a 100K salary and say, hey, go out there and have the same amount of like grit that I do about this sale and growing this company. I mean, I just don't see that as even a match.
But it's hard, right? Because we've got these overinflated salespeople's salaries these days, right? You've got like, a new salesperson can go to Adobe as an SDR and make 75K, right? So it's like, so now you've got like these people that have been in, like, especially if you're going to look for somebody that's kind of seasoned, but like they've had a comfortable salary. I mean, 100K plus is like, it's almost becoming normal, right? I think Trish Bertuzzi just came out, the Bridge group just came out with some like data, like I think it was like 75K minimum for like
easily.
Yeah, like
easily.
So, my point is like, you go to somebody that's got a family, right? They've got, and you can't hire in the big city anymore because like nobody, you can't find a 50K salary. They can't even afford to pay their rent.
Well, this is where the remote conversation comes in. That's so exciting. And I think that it's invaluable, right? You can't put a price tag on that, giving someone an opportunity to have the flexibility to be at home. And then you're able to get outside the city for sure. I have a completely remote company for this very reason. I went remote a year and a half ago. We used to be here in San Francisco. I still live here, but that was one of the key reasons why I did it. I need people that value work-life balance, working from home, hiring in other cities where the salaries aren't crazy inflated, and really placing value on things outside of what, we've been so conditioned to see the dollar as like the most value because that inflation rose so quickly and so dramatically over the past, 6 to 10 years. But really, I think we're swimming back and people are saying, hey, I'd rather maybe walk from that extra 25, 50K variable that I'm used to being googly eyed over in order to have my sanity back, perhaps my health back, have a family. I mean, these things matter. So that's what we look for when we hire Vanetta is people that really value work-life balance. And I mean, everything from, the ability to set your own schedule to mental health. I don't know, but it's just, we're not in that game anymore.
So you're talking about like, it's about kind of getting creative at this point, right? I mean, and also understanding, because I mean, all of our employees are remote too. I think, you're looking at SaaS companies right now. I know Chorus, like a lot of their salespeople are all remote, and they're like a San Francisco brand.
Yeah, smart that they went remote because it wasn't always that way, right?
Yeah, exactly. And so from a services and a SaaS perspective, it's like if you can't give that big salary, the takeaways on this, because I always like to give the takeaways, is to say, okay, how do we make up for that in other ways? So one is we'll give you more freedom and we'll let you work from home. We won't micromanage you as long as you're doing what you're doing, right? Mm-hmm. We'll give you less meetings. We'll let you go to your son's soccer game, right? Like
absolutely.
All the things that you got like handcuffed in the corporate world and couldn't go to or do. So, and then, the third thing on this is to say, listen, we're going to give you fattier commissions. We're going to take less of a margin. But your salary is going to be X, but like you're going to make tons more and being able to sell the value of what that compensation plan looks like over the long term if they essentially just do what they need to do.
Yeah. I mean, that's how I have it set up here. I haven't seen under the hood of your business yet. I think that would be really fun because I think we share similar, just kind of services businesses. Right. And I think also what I have found over the past 6 years, I've had my business for almost 6 years now, is this really the client profile in the end that makes us successful. So being able to identify, if you're bringing on somebody to sell your solution, your agency, helping them identify like what is the actual best client for you so that you can be successful and get reoccurring business from them. Because we can all go out and sell like chickens with our heads cut off, trying to find just anyone that will partner with our agency, right? Or we can realize that's actually just spinning our wheels in the mud. It's not good for anyone involved. Let's find the ideal client and dig in with them and have a land and expand model that has reoccurring business from clients that are right for us. And that's value alignment too, between the actual client and, your business. And then of course the reps that you bring on. Does that make sense?
It makes total sense.
We're uncovering right now. And so that's, I think the most recent learning iteration for me has really been like, okay, it is all about our client. We are successful.
So what you could essentially say that's like one of the identifiers, if you're ready or not to hire somebody, is do you understand what that is, right? Because I think that as a founder, whether you're in SaaS or services, that's really your job in the beginning phases is to really understand that, because it's, we've gone through this where we've hired salespeople and we didn't know that completely, right? We didn't know exactly what we were offering. We hadn't really nailed our exact ICP, ideal customer profile. And so we brought people on and they're kind of like deer in headlights. But we did have this argument on the counter argument is, if you're a business owner and you're looking to hire that, how much of hiring a new salesperson and making it known to them to say, listen, we're in the stages of figuring that out, right? Like we're going to need you to go a little above and beyond. Like your job's going to be even more intensive to help us do that.
Identify.
Yeah.
Yep.
Is that a fair thing to say to somebody?
I think it's a fair thing to say. It's a fair qualifier, but I think this is why hiring someone from services is really important for you too, because unless you've been in this game, it's going to be difficult to understand how to uncover that for your agency specifically. But it's a fair qualifier. Yeah.
And from a SaaS perspective, you probably want somebody that's sold, products before, and you might say to them, hey, we don't have all the collateral and everything that you had at that enterprise mid-market company. We don't have all the inbound demand generation. So, at this point, just understand that we're going to give you higher rips for becoming just a determined hunter, right?
Yeah. And this is where that higher base salary might come in for a first or second sales hire for a young company that doesn't have the collateral, that needs help with operations and writing the roadmap and, all the bumps and bruises of being new to the market, going in and identifying your target market. I mean, it just takes more of an operational mind. So I found those base salaries going up for that reason too with early companies. I saw the 70-30 split come in for the first sales hire, 3 years back. It was like it started to really change the game because they have to bring in so much operational, whether it's expertise or just the willingness to roll up your sleeves and do it and figure it out, right? Yep. So there's a lot of uniqueness to being an early company, and that's definitely one of the reasons for sure.
And I'm sure that, is this ever a selling point to you? Because I think it's something we've thought about. I know that we talk about to our early stage SaaS clients about this is like, okay, you're going to do some early hiring. One of the things that's very, very appealing to a very seasoned AE, from my experience as being an AE for many years, is to say, listen, at this point in your career, you're sick of being an account executive, because you hear that all the time, right? So it's like, I just want to move up. Like I want to lead a team. And so I think in the early stages, like people will take a salary hit, or do you find this, maybe I'm wrong, take kind of a salary, hit to say, hey, you come on and we're going to make you the senior lead of sales or whatever that title is. But here's the thing is the opportunities here that if you can do your job correctly in the first 6 months, here's some numbers, like we're going to give you more of a salary to go out and hire and become a VP of sales, right? And using that as another kind of selling point.
Yeah, just get them onto, it's really just about true career opportunity. I don't think that's talked about enough. I think we think about things as job opportunity when really like we need to do some career planning and help people understand like there's real growth here. Getting stuck in the AE track. I mean, and it's easy for it to be sticky because you can jump to the next company and get a significant bump on your, base or on target earnings, which is its own conversation, right? Because that's all just a kind of a phantom number unless you're able to even hit that. But I think this is where people get bored as an account executive for sure. And they feel like, well, there's a ceiling here almost, right? Like I can go and I can make more money, but am I having any kind of career growth? Am I able to do more?
Yeah. So, what's the plan? How can I be big? How can I be a part of something that's bigger and actually say that I had a key role in that growth rather than I was just another employee.
And that's, I think, why the first sales hire is such an appealing role for account executives that want to go in and take on more responsibility naturally. And for sales hire, I mean, you might not have a VP title, but you're owning everything. I mean, you've got to have your CRO hat on. So it's an appealing role to take. It's definitely a high risk role, let's be real. And this is why I tell early founders that are just building this small team, I'm like, your recruiters are so critical in this process. And everyone at the company is a recruiter when you're that early, right? I mean, you're an unknown brand. So who are your ambassadors? And, your recruiters should be like really, really good salespeople, because you've got to go out there and you've got a shot on goal to get somebody to join a company that nobody knows about yet. So there's just a lot of risk involved, which is very appealing. And also, it's just like you got to have the right team around it in order to be successful in building something at such an early stage.
Well, let's talk about that. So recruiter, right? And I'm gonna raise my hand and be guilty of this. You look at the price tag that a recruiter tells you, and you guys are not cheap, and you shouldn't be, right? You especially if you're masters of your craft and you're doing all the right things, just not trying to stuff butts in seats. Mm-hmm. As a SaaS founder, it could be very, very like sticker shock. And I've heard this so many times where they go, oh my God, it's $10,000 just to for them to find me a role. So like, not only do I got to pay the 75,000, now I've got to, whatever that number is, I'm making up 10K.
The fee.
But like, I got to pay the 10K just to get them hired. I don't even know if they're going to work out. And like, so how do you just said, I'd go out and hire a recruiter. Give me your sales pitch on that to, a founder of services or SaaS. Doesn't matter really, because you're both paying the same ticket price.
Yeah.
What's your selling point on that?
Agencies are expensive. I think oh man, there are a lot of different kind of agencies out there. It's a hard pool to be swimming in. But I think, the fees are significant, but the investment is absolutely worth it if you find the right person. I think the retention is a little bit scary because there are a lot of bad agencies out there, or quite frankly, hiring teams that don't know what they're doing. And in retrospect, you might eat dust on some of that. But I mean, not to cut myself out of the picture, but I think one of the smartest things a company can do is hire on a really good salesperson to come in and be their recruiter and give them a commission heavy plan and watch them help recruit for their company internally on like a sales comp plan. That's what I think they should be doing. I think you can cut out the agency, bring on someone internal, make sure they're great at sales, and see what happens. I mean, nobody's doing that, and then they're hiring on these recruiters that maybe were former agency that want to come in and lean on a really big base salary, which I think is a flag. I don't think that you should have an internal recruiter on 125K base with no variable. I mean, that's just a disaster every single time, but people are continuing to do that over and over and over again. So then you've got a 125K base recruiter that's calling me, right? Now you're really out of money.
Yeah. So you're hiring somebody to essentially manage the recruiter.
yeah. Or clearly they're not getting it done. And so then they, give us a call. But you get where I'm going. I mean, I think that there's a play there, and I don't see a lot of people doing it. I actually had a gal call me the other day. She's a sales consultant, kind of interim VP type. She called me. She's like, my client wants to hire a recruiter internally, and the recruiter's coming from agency, and said, well, where's my commission plan? And I was like, this is so badass. I'm always telling people that they need to do this. So I told her, how I would essentially pay a recruiter to perform. And so I'm not sure exactly who the company is, but I thought that was really cool. And I think that will become more common, and it should. I think that we're making a lot of mistakes with hiring recruiters internally on high base salaries that are then calling agencies, and just a lot of money going out and not enough strategic thinking around it.
How many people should you, this is another question that I'm going to come from, that I've always questioned. How many people should you interview for a role?
I don't know if that's a question that can be answered. It totally depends on the position. If it's a super specialized position, I would imagine you're interviewing a lot less people, right? I mean, if this is a catch-all AE role where you need an ongoing 10 hires, I would imagine that pipeline's pretty packed and you're interviewing for that every single week. So I don't know if that's an easy question to answer.
Well, okay, let's just use me an example, right? So let's say I'm going to say, okay, I want to go hire my first sales hire, which I'm telling you this only because I screwed this up the first 2 or 3, where I was like, had one good interview, kind of knew their background, was like, done. Like, didn't go out and look for other people.
And then it was a mistake. It didn't end up working out.
Yep, didn't work out, right? And I had, and then I go,
perspective. Yeah.
I'm kicking myself because I'm going, oh my gosh. I mean, like, I should have interviewed at least 5 people, right? Or whatever that, I just don't know what that number is. Or if, like you said, there might not be that magic number.
Yeah, there's not a magic number. I think you got excited, you pulled the trigger, there was some kind of synergy there. You felt that it was right. I'm sorry to hear it didn't work out, but I mean, there's a lot of learning there. You'll never just interview one person again, right? That there's this is why recruiting is such a special process, is because it requires a panel, it requires comparison, it requires iteration. So I think recruiters are incredibly undervalued when it comes to the process piece of our role, right? Because it does require you to talk to multiple candidates. There is not a magic number, but in order for something to stand out as, this is right for me, requires a lot of conversations. And a lot of that learning happens through recruiters and the initial conversations with candidates that never get to the hiring manager, right? So if you were to hire an agency to help you with your next hire, a lot of those conversations are going to be happening that perhaps you don't even get to that person where they're getting their information, right? So there's definitely kind of a chain of communication that eventually kind of leads up to you. So you want to make sure you have some really good recruiters out there doing proper, iteration.
I want to go back to something you said earlier where you said that, and not taking yourself out of a job, but like, you hire your first salesperson and you let them do the recruiting. So how important is the personal branding aspect of an early stage company, whether that's services or product? And, you've got the CEO that's very social, right? Maybe their product's not like super known, but they, somebody's been following their content for a while.
Right.
Somebody's been reading about them. How do you see that increases, whether that's in sales? Now, I'll give you an example. Jake Rennie, he just went from Adobe to the VP of sales at Tiled, right? Tiled.co, new startup, really doing some really cool things. I think they've got 3 or 4 million in funding, kind of like an A round. Mm-hmm. And one of Jake's strengths that I see is that he's got this huge network of just awesome salespeople that respect him because he's built somewhat of a brand. And it's making it a lot easier for him to recruit. Mm-hmm. Now, do you see the same thing? And do you on your side, where you do see that these companies that are investing early stage into their personal brands, it's actually equating to better recruiting?
I mean, absolutely. I also think in services, again, back to, we talked about how services is special because it's about your personal brand more than a product company. Although I agree that a CEO with a lot of great content that's out there is putting a personal brand alongside the actual product itself, which is interesting. And that's like the age of the influencer. But I think when you provide an opportunity for someone to come to your agency and build a personal brand with you, alongside you, right? Under a larger umbrella kind of concept or mission, I think that's really an appealing opportunity as well. Like recruiters, people work with recruiters because of who they are. It's less about the brand. I know that when somebody calls one of my recruiters at Vanetta, they're calling that person to work with them directly. We have a great reputation and a great brand, but I know for sure that it's more about the person that they're working with. So I think like fostering an environment where someone can have their own identity within your brand is really important too. As much as we love to follow the influencers that we respect, I think giving everybody an opportunity to be, God, I hate that word influencer, but giving everybody an opportunity to have their own identity, right, is really big. And I think really good for career self-esteem, so that they know they're building something no matter where they go. People shouldn't feel like, oh, well, I'm going to go invest in this brand and I'm going to give my heart and soul to this company. But once I've done my work there to bolster and uphold this brand and move on to the next, it's like I'm starting over. No, like allow them to build their own brand wherever they go. So I think encouraging your hires to have their own content, encouraging them to, be their own name and fostering that. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think
Compass does like a really good job of this. I've been following them, Compass Real Estate.
Yeah.
They've done a really good job of this. I see that that's there, whether or not it's being said, it's obvious to me that they've got a lot of opportunity to build a personal brand within a larger brand that is, incredible, but they're really all about bolstering the individual.
Well, I think, I talked to a sales rep that works for Neil Patel. Mm-hmm. And I was just curious, he's one of my buddies. And I said, hey, like, what's your salary? Because I'm trying to get like a good idea of like, kind of the same model. And, salary was pretty low. And I was like, oh my gosh, I know you were making way more than that. He's like, well, but I've always I've been following Neil forever, right? Like I've always wanted, to work for him. And I thought that was interesting. The guy left better, to go because he'd already had the confidence to say, I look up to this guy who is the brand that I'm going to be working for and the face of the brand. And I'm sure that, the Facebook, Google, right? People go there, whatever the salary is, it's just like, hey, I just want Facebook on my resume, right? Like, but, and so I think, in this case, he's getting paid lower, to work for Neil Patel, but he gets to say work for Neil Patel and he's already bought into what Neil Patel is about and what they do and all that. So I think, it was kind of an eye-opening moment for me, even though I'm doing a lot of this brand building and all that. But it's like, okay, that's great because I've had kind of the same experiences. I've got a couple of employees that I know, came to do that.
Well, it's like you want to work for a brand that you respect, a boss that you respect, and you want to sell something you believe in. right? So I think that that's huge. And I love that this digital age is allowing us to do that more and more, right? To be less stuck behind a logo and to bring in like the human element, which is really big. But I think in your case, I think you're really on the right track with having a remote company. You have an amazing personal brand. You're well respected. I mean, the right team is going to start probably coming together in this next iteration, especially since you've learned those kind of harder lessons on hiring the wrong people. And that's personal to you, right? The wrong person at your agency is the right person somewhere else. I mean, it's just a matter of finding the value alignment of the people on your team and the value alignment with your ICP, I think is really big.
Yep,
And
absolutely.
once that's identified, it just makes your sales team that much more successful and creating, if you're able to say, this is our ICP, like the likelihood of them being successful in that role is like 2x what it would be before that's uncovered, before that's figured out, right? So I think that's a really exciting time for any agencies when you really say, okay, this is our value, this is what we bring, and this is the type of client we work with. If they don't fit that mold, we don't work with them. We're able to say no, right? And I think that that makes a great rep too, is them understanding like, hey, every lead you talk to, you might actually have to be the one to go, this isn't a fit. You know, we're weeding out more than we're weeding in to be a good agency, right?
Yep.
So that you know that with the bandwidth that you do have, you're working with the right client.
So, okay, this is an interesting. So we talked about like the founder or the salesperson or the people internally having a good personal brand. Now, let's flip this on the other side, right? Let's say that you're going out and you're hiring and you're like, hey, there's 3 things that I'm looking at. One is a resume, right? What have they done and what's their track record? And that one can be fluffed, so you got to be careful about that.
Very.
Then you go and you go, okay, they actually have a personal brand themselves, right? So like they've already got an audience that's targeted towards what we sell and what we do, whether it's services or product, doesn't matter. But is that personal brand, and I would love to hear your point of view on this, is that helpful from the hiring side when you're looking to hire somebody else, or is it hurtful? Because I've heard that work both ways, right? Some people are just like, well, all they want to do is
Promote themselves.
Yeah, they want to grow themselves. They don't want to grow the company.
Yeah, I mean, or you're fostering someone to come in and become your competitor, so to speak, right? I think agencies deal with that a lot, which is, it's a beautiful thing. I think we are an industry of entrepreneurs for sure, because anyone in services can kind of break off and do their own thing. It's not as easy for an AE to break off and build the product that had, it's just like, it's a totally different game. So I think there is that risk of, hey, I could bring in somebody with a great personal brand. They've got a great following, they're swimming, running in my same circles. We're going after the same demographic. This seems like a smart thing to do, but at the same time, like you might just be bringing in somebody to kind of create a meshy, it just wouldn't work necessarily. I actually don't think that would be the right call. If anything, I would sit down with them and probably inspire them to start their own agency. That's probably where the conversation would go.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of conversations with recruiters that have kind of gone that way, where I've said, you know what, like it looks like you're on your way to starting your own thing. I think you should focus on that.
Interesting. Yeah. Because
I was that person at my former agency, right? So there are people that want to like work with you and your brand and respect your brand, and that's where they belong and that's where they want to be. And then there are people that are truly entrepreneurs that are going to start their business, whether it's now or later. Identify who they are and just say, hey, best of luck, I'm here for you.
Yeah. Well, I guess there's another aspect to that, which is, maybe they don't have a personal brand, but they have a really big network in that industry. So they've been in that, whatever industry it is that you're in, they've maybe worked at your competitor or something. I think that's a little bit more appealing, right? Is like, they just know the industry and the space really well. Maybe they're not like super well known on like the social channels, but like indirectly.
Really well networked. Yeah.
It's kind of like the VoIP, like Nextiva, for example, like a VoIP services, right? I mean, those guys, the channel partners, or they've been in the game for a really long time, and they just kind of go like company to company, and they just take their network with them, right?
I mean, which is great, and that works. I mean, I just keep thinking about recruiting because anybody can start their own shop anywhere in the world with their network, couple clients, and just boom, there you go. A plus B equals C. So I'm in a very unique industry because there can be virtually no overhead in what we do. So it's different than I think like the pieces that you have to bring together as a creative agency.
But your relationships are your overhead. I mean,
yeah, I mean, the network is your net worth. I mean, it's one of my favorite quotes, right? It's absolutely true in recruiting, especially. But I think, when it comes to hiring for product companies, which is what we focus on, I think one of the message I'd want to hammer home is that it's really more about your holistic planning and your executive team and dedication to hiring diversely than it is about like the tactics of recruiting. It's also looking for characteristics like loyalty and dedication. I think we've kind of over romanticized the unicorn talent and undervalued kind of like the racehorse, if you will. I find my clients in love triangles a lot, where the candidate that they want doesn't want them, but the candidate that wants to work for them, they undervalue because they aren't valuing the fact that somebody wants to come work for them. I think that's so huge and so undervalued because loyalty is critical at an early stage. You can't bring in the top producer that isn't really dedicated to your brand and wants to be with you for the long haul. Perhaps it's a stepping stone. Boom, you have some turnover where you could have brought on the loyal rep, right? So there's something to be said for that too. I think we're all very googly-eyed over the top performers, but so is everybody else, right?
and
how are we balancing retention in that?
And how are we balancing passion for the product, passion for the service, passion to learn more? I think that's where I've gotten in trouble as I've looked at the resume and I've let the resume speak. But what I really should have been thinking was, maybe they don't have the acumen that this other person does or the experience, but they have more. They're like on fire to learn.
Yes.
Right. And so, maybe it takes a little bit more time to ramp them up. But like, what's the long-term customer lifetime value of that sales rep who is just on fire for example, like for us is like, they got to love marketing, right? They've got to love social media. They've got to love the strategy piece. They've got to love the implementation piece. They can't just come here to do a job because it's just like, I mean, if they just want to do a job, they need to work for a brand. If they want to be on fire to have this bigger vision for the client, like then they're in the services space.
Yeah. No, it's absolutely true. I'm all about mentoring, coaching, developing, molding. I mean, I think that's so big. At least that's how it's been at my firm. I've hired a lot of people that didn't have experience at all. That was my kind of route. Part of that is you're not bringing anybody in with bad habits, so to speak. And you can really instill your values in that process and develop people that are loyal to the brand because you've mentored them and coached them into kind of who they are today, sort of, right? So I think there's something to be said for that too. That's a different angle on hiring. Not everybody wants to take that angle. I think a lot of early founders are struggling with the fact that they don't have time to train. I think that's super problematic too. And there needs to be more investment in bringing in trainers and bringing in coaches. And that's kind of a blind spot right now. So, I want to hire somebody that has, comes from my industry, comes from a competitor. I don't have time to hold their hand. Right. Which is like, okay, I've heard that, but it's really not working. Right. I mean, it's like you might hire somebody that you think you don't have to train, but you're not creating retention. You're not creating, fostering an environment of mentorship. And then you see.
So that may be like a prerequisite before you hire is to say, do I have the support system and the time to actually coach this person? Or do I have the budget to go hire a mentor that can mentor them instead of and replace me as like, I guess I don't know if that's a thing, but maybe I'll go hire a coach that knows me and knows our industry pretty well that can coach them.
Yeah, I think that's a huge piece that's been missing. And I think people are finally catching on that trainers, coaches, mentorship, leaders with a high EQ. I mean, all of these things that kind of got brushed aside for a minute. I don't know if you're following. This is just my observation over the past 5 years of like the analytical leader that came in so strong and then teams weren't staying together, reps were unhappy, and so it's like we have to find that perfect balance. And I know it's hard to do, but I think the esteemed leader should be held above the priority of the analytical leader. And oftentimes they're looking, well, I want somebody that scaled this company from series A to B and that all of these like tactical objectives and stuff. But you're really missing the point of retention, which is huge. Because if you have a bunch of turnover at your company, like, you're in a bad situation. So I think loyalty
costing yourself a ton of money.
You're costing yourself a ton of money. Yeah, it might appear to be the right decision on the front end, but in retrospect, there'll be a lot of regrets.
And that's where recruiters come in, right? Is to help you stop that from happening. And I think some people have, like me, you have to get burned a few times and you go, okay, we need a recruiter. Mm-hmm. Like we're not good at this. So let's go hire the expert.
Yeah. I mean, and from my perspective, I started to identify first-time founders as a riskier client for me to work with. It's really tough if you haven't had those experiences because it's the first time founding a company and you're cutting corners on investing in people, cutting corners on investing in, interim VP or whatever it is that you need in order to hold it together. It makes my job really hard if I'm not working with someone that understands the importance of all of these things. So a second or third time founder often has gone through enough of this that they like kind of let us take the reins, are willing to invest in people, don't pay under market. I mean, there's a laundry list of things that I think you've learned at that point in time. But
and they trust you.
Yeah, I think, it's a first time founder with a lot of self-awareness that they don't know everything is really big. I mean, that's what I look for. Often they do have a coach themselves. They're willing to bring in people from their respective kind of areas of expertise and let them do their thing, which is big. So, ego can get in the way as well. That's for sure.
So let's end this. I know we're almost at time. So last question. It's a very, very hot topic. And I actually just listened to a podcast with John Barrows and Lauren Bailey about this, but the struggle to find female salespeople, right? And I know that there's, we're really getting into this, like you talked about, this topic about diversity, which is amazing, right? Especially in the Silicon Valley, is like, we need to diversify, right? Whether that's race or sex or whatever that is. But I think with Chorus doing some studies, and there's other companies doing studies and actually showing that women in sales, just the data saying they perform better. I mean, plain and simple. How do you get over that struggle? Because when Lauren Bailey was talking about it, when I was listening to the podcast, she says, we're not getting anyone to apply, right? Like we're not getting women to even apply to get to the point where we can have the conversation to get a bigger and more diverse sales team. Are you running into that problem with your clients, and like, how are you overcoming that?
So this is definitely a hot topic. My take on this is that we need to throw away the job description. I mentioned it earlier, like creating real career opportunity. I think we've become hung up on the job description, which is like a certain amount of years of experience coming from a particular industry. And really what that job description says is sort of written for a man in his tenure, right? It models a man in his career. And we're not seeing that. It's a big blind spot. So creating real career opportunity for women is huge, and something people aren't noticing. So it's really about, are we attracting and are we creating an opportunity perhaps for a woman to take a step up in her career? So this whole expecting to be here at this particular level and come in, laterally or have that experience is unrealistic if it's still an 80-20 split of women with experience. Does that make sense? So I think it's this experience marker that's really been a blind spot for everybody. And that I would love to see scraped off the job description entirely. I think that, whatever this data you said come out from Chorus about women just being better sellers, I don't know if you can expand on that a little bit for me. But, these things are likely in the DNA. Right? I think that the years of experience it's really been a barrier for us in bringing women on, women leaders too, especially. It's been really tough for me to watch companies get so stuck on that years of experience, right? Or, well, they haven't had 2 years of experience leading enterprise sales teams. It's like, well, maybe they don't, right? So if they don't, then how are we going to change this frame? How are we going to reframe this? And how are we going to attract women by creating real career opportunities? So that's my take on it. And I'm helping my clients with that all the time.
So what you're saying is really it's about changing the expectations for the role, because and I think I'm glad to see that we're taking the college degree part out of it, even though I'm a college graduate. It's like, thank God we're taking that out of it, because we are all kind of understanding that, especially it's sales. Yeah. There's no correlation. I've never seen any correlation. Some of the best salespeople I have ever worked with have no
That's such
college
a great
degree.
example of what I'm talking about. Exactly that. But I also think like expecting women to apply, like why aren't they applying, right? And it's like at a baseline, it's been a candidates market since I started in recruiting in 2012. It's been a candidates market. They hold all the power. So what are we doing to go out and recruit them, poach them, find them, attract them? It really is an outbound process. Recruiting is sales through and through. So if there's any kind of sitting back and expecting, why aren't women coming to us? Like, let's figure out a way to go to them. Let's figure out to knock on their door and get, hey, here's a career opportunity I want to run past you. It's not any years of experience or any of that nonsense on there, but it's a real growth plan. And it says, I don't see that outbound recruiting happening enough, if that makes sense, in that way.
So it's less about, it's less about actually waiting for them to apply, and it's more about being
Absolutely.
aggressive and going out and, I think the other thing is that
If I got an in-mail that said, hey, I've got an amazing career opportunity for you that I'd love to run past, just keep it short and sweet. Can I get on the phone with you? Like I'd get on that call.
and then
It's not
finding
a
the
job,
thing,
it's a career, right?
and then finding things that the correlation of other things other than like, the financial aspect, like, maybe working from home, maybe they're a mom and they're like, hey, I want the flexibility to be able to like drop my kids off at school and do this.
It's
And I
huge.
mean, and
Yeah.
I think, that's a struggle right now, is just our companies embracing, and that just doesn't have to be with women, but I mean, are they embracing all the little things that the employees want, right? Just want to be able to say, hey, I'll do a damn good job. And you know what? I might not work the typical 8 to 5 because, from 8 to 9, I've got this going on. From, 1 to 2, I have to go do this. But hey, I will work till 7 to make up for those hours. And I'll kind of work on that. I'll work on the weekends. I'll do all these things. And are we
Right.
allowing it? I think, women have more responsibilities than men in many aspects, right? I mean, they just have other things going on. And a lot of times that can involve kids, especially later in their career. And it's like, how are you adapting to that?
We're valuing different things now, at least in this Silicon Valley bubble, because of everything we've seen from phantom valuations to, variables that don't make sense to hopping from one company to the next in a year and a half sprints. Like, we're valuing having the balance and then having more control over our destiny and our career by being given an opportunity that makes sense. I love companies coming to the table saying, hey, like, we're not about raising money. We're about being profitable. We're about being a real business, right? That's another kind of, I think, reaction to what we went through for so long, which everything was just kind of smoke and mirrors. So people are looking for real opportunities, and they're looking for that balance, and they're looking for a career that actually has upward growth, right? So I think these are really exciting times. I think we've all learned a lot of lessons. I've been along for the ride with a lot of these companies, and it's been a lot of fun.
Okay, cool. So we are out of time. We're way over time. So this is like the longest one we had yet. But hey, that just tells you this was a good conversation. Okay, so how can people reach out to you? So my thing is, you're very accessible and you're always willing to give away some free advice. So like, there's free advice that you could reach out to her for, or, hey, if you're looking to hire, I would highly recommend her agency. I'm probably going to be using them. So, so we'll go from there.
Yeah, no, I think what I'm looking for is value alignment with my clients. So if you are ready to hire holistically and diversely, and you care about women in leadership, and you want to start being a human-centric organization, I want to talk to you. If none of those things make sense, maybe now is not the time, but I'm really about value alignment with my clients, and we're doing a darn good job at helping people set them up for success, organizations, not just for the here and now, but the next, 50, 100, 300. I think it's an incredible opportunity for a young company to do it right out of the gates. I think you have a huge advantage over the larger companies that are kind of looking in retrospect and going, ouch, we messed up. We're a homogeneous organization. How do we untangle, right? So we're looking for young companies, seed, Series A, ready to do all of those things, and to be consulted by a team that, really cares.
Love it.
Yeah.
All right,
We
we'll
love what
reach
we
out
do.
to her. Thank you for your time. And,
Of course.
We'll have another business banter coming up next week. Thank you guys.